All right, let's set the scene. Imagine it's the ninth year after the Hijrah. The dust is finally starting to settle across the Arabian Peninsula. But you have to understand, this wasn't an ending, not even close. This was the very beginning of a transformation so profound it would reshape everything. So right after the conquest of Makkah, and after a really key announcement was made during the Hajj, the old world, well, it was fading fast. A new era was dawning, and it was a monumental shift that you could literally feel in the air, from the coastlines all the way to the deep desert. For centuries, and I mean centuries, tribal identity was all tied up in this whole pantheon of idols that were housed in the Kaaba. And now, just like that era was done, finished. This created a huge power vacuum, sure, but it also created a spiritual one. Tribes all over the land were left asking themselves the same question: what comes next? And the answer? It was crystal clear. This wasn't just some political shuffle, not a new leader taking over. This was a complete reset of the entire worldview. The slate was being wiped clean to make way for a society built on one single powerful principle: the worship of one God and one God alone. So what happened? You see this incredible convergence. I'm talking from Yemen way down in the south, all the way up to the borders of Syria. Delegations from dozens of different tribes all set out for the new heart of the faith, Al-Madeenah. So many people came in that one year that it earned a special name in history, the Year of Delegations. But here's where the story gets really fascinating, because this wasn't about tribes coming to submit to a new king, not at all. It was more like they were enrolling in a new kind of school. Let's dig into how exactly these different groups were welcomed and, more importantly, taught. The whole approach was just so systematic, but also deeply personal. These delegates weren't treated like political envoys. They were honored guests. They got their own special housing. They were invited right into the heart of the community, the mosque itself, to see the prayers, to feel the spirit of the place. And they were given direct personal access to learn. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, made sure of it, even telling his companions, "Teach your brothers." It was all about education. And that quote right there, that sums it all up perfectly. This wasn't about hammering out treaties or political maneuvering. No, the number one reason these delegates traveled all that way was to learn. They came with this genuine hunger to understand what this new faith was all about, so they could take that knowledge back home to their people. So what did this school actually look like in practice? Let's take a look at our first case study. This is a delegation that traveled a huge distance, through some really dangerous territory, all to ask just a few absolutely essential questions. Okay, so the tribe of Abd-Qais, they came from the far eastern coast. They explained that because of enemy tribes, they could only travel safely during the sacred months. So they didn't have time for long, complicated discussions. They basically said, look, give us the bottom line. Give us a clear, direct set of instructions that we can live by and teach to our people back home. They wanted the core of it. And the answer they got was the very bedrock of Islam. It wasn't some complex philosophy. It was a simple, powerful, and actionable framework for life. 1. Testify to the faith. 2. Establish the prayers. 3. Take care of the poor. And 4. Contribute to the community. These were the pillars they could build their entire lives on. And I love this detail because it shows that the guidance wasn't just abstract, it was incredibly practical. They were taught about social conduct right down to the kind of cups they should use. They were told, hey, avoid using vessels made from gourds or coated with tar, because if you left dates in them, they'd ferment and turn into alcohol really fast. Faith wasn't just an idea in your head, it was part of your daily life. Now, let's switch gears to our next case, because this one has a totally different vibe. It's not a big group, it's just one man. A man from the desert. Direct. Intense. And he didn't come to learn something new. He came to verify what he'd already heard. His name was Dimaam ibn Tha'labah, and he just walks right into the mosque, finds the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and starts firing off these questions. Now, you might think this sounds rude, but it wasn't. This was a man who was deadly serious. He needed to hear the core commands directly from the source, and he needed them confirmed by an oath to God. For every single question Dimaam asked, about prayer, about fasting, about charity, the answer was exactly the same. Simple, powerful, solemn. Oh Allah, yes. You can just imagine the tension in the air as this man confirms, one by one, the absolute, non-negotiable duties of his faith. And once he got his answers, Dimaam makes this incredible declaration. He accepts the message, and he makes a promise that's just as direct as his questions were. He would do exactly what was required. No more and no less. That is pure, uncut commitment to the fundamentals. As Dimaam turned and walked away, the Prophet, peace be upon him, turned to his companions and said this. It's just such a powerful statement. It's this beautiful testament to the idea that sincere, honest devotion to the core principles of the faith, well, that's the key. Now, not every delegation came just for the basics. Some, like the Christians from Najraan, showed up ready for a high-level theological debate. They were ready to put the core ideas of their faith right up against the core ideas of Islam. You know, this slide tells a whole story before a single word of debate was even spoken. The first time the delegation arrived, they were decked out in fancy silks and gold, very ostentatious, and they were turned away. They came back the next day wearing the simple, humble clothes of monks, and they were welcomed. The message was clear. This was a space for sincere spiritual talk, not for showing off your worldly status. The absolute heart of their argument was about the nature of Jesus, peace be upon him. And their question was a direct challenge. They were essentially asking a gotcha question, arguing that his miraculous birth was proof of his divinity. And the response that came wasn't from human logic. It was from divine revelation. This verse from the Quran completely reframed the entire debate. It presented an even greater miracle, the creation of Adam, who didn't have a father or a mother. Think about it. If God could create Adam from nothing but dust, then creating Jesus from a mother alone was certainly within his power. It was a brilliant answer. So when the debate reached a stalemate, a final, non-violent path to the truth was proposed, straight from the Quran. Both sides would gather their families, come together, and pray, asking God to show who was being untruthful. But the Christians of Najraan, they declined. They sensed the truthfulness of the Prophet and feared the outcome, so they backed down from the challenge and agreed to a peace treaty instead. So after all these intense meetings, some about basic rules, others about deep theology, what was the result? What happened when these delegates went home? Well, they didn't just take a new religion with them. They took a whole new way of being. You see, what really truly stuck with them wasn't just the logic of the arguments or the clarity of the laws. It was the character of the people they met. They saw with their own eyes a community built on kindness, generosity, and real love for one another. They went back to their tribes not just as teachers, but as ambassadors of a whole new culture. And that brings us to a final thought, something to really chew on. The Year of Delegations gives us this amazing model where victory isn't about changing flags on a map. It's about changing hearts and minds through open discussion and education. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the true measure of strength? Is it the power to conquer, or is it the power to teach?